What happened to Gotham Knights? Even before Gotham Knights launched, it was under a lot of controversy. 1. 30 FPS issue. The game was 30 FPS on consoles. There was no 60 FPS mode, and this was a time where everyone wanted to see 60 FPS in their games. I don't blame them. 30 FPS versus 60 FPS, the jump is pretty insane. Then you had the confusion about it being set in the Arkhamverse, except it's not set in the Arkhamverse, which was also a weird choice for Gotham Knights. Then you had the live service things, that for some reason there were live service elements in a game that wasn't meant to be live service, so it was a bunch of issues combined into one, and then you actually had the game itself. The reviews and the overall consensus of Gotham Knights really pushed me away from playing it. In fact, I didn't even bother playing it until recently, which is why this video is being made. You see, I went into this game with some expectations of what it's going to be. First off, there's 4 playable characters, there's a leveling system, and there is a story to be told. So I instantly thought, okay, maybe the story's pretty good. After all, even though the reviews weren't particularly nice to it, the story, from what I could tell, got, you know, it was mediocre to good. It wasn't leaning towards bad, it was leaning towards good. So I was kind of excited to experience a new story within a new universe with Batman, you know, Robin, Nightwing, etc, etc, etc. But what I got was kind of, well, as you saw the title, it was disappointing. So we should probably talk about it. So firstly, before I get into the game itself, let's talk about those issues that I mentioned earlier. First off, the 30 FPS issue. It did not affect me because I played it on PC. On PC, I was getting a solid 60 FPS most of the time. There were a couple frame dips, but it didn't really bother me that much. So I can't really talk about it from a console point of view because I didn't play it on consoles. And to be honest with you, I never will play it on consoles because I don't want to play it at 30 FPS. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, it's got to be 60 FPS. It's got to be 60 FPS. I can accept 30 FPS if the game is technically unable to reach 60 FPS on consoles. I totally get that. Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PlayStation 4. Are we going to get that 60 FPS? No, absolutely no chance. Look at that game. It looks insane. It plays insane. The AI is insane, etc, etc. So there are certain moments where you're like, okay, 30 FPS is acceptable. And I think a lot of people are going to be really pissed off when GTA 6 comes out because that's going to be 30 FPS. There's no way Rockstar goes back to 60 FPS because they don't seem to care about 60 FPS, which is a very weird choice, but hey, it's Rockstar. They can do whatever they want. So, Gotham Knights is set in a brand new universe where you can explore different stories with different types of characters, with different plot lines without having to focus on the stuff that came before. I think that was a good idea. There was a lot of confusion around it, whether it was going to be set in the Arkhamverse, but that got cleared up pretty quickly when they kill Batman. So Batman dies in Gotham Knights, which is why you play as the 4 characters: Nightwing, Batgirl, Robin, and Red Hood. I mainly played as Red Hood because Red Hood is cool, except he's not cool in this game, but we'll get to it. Gotham Knights to me is kind of like a murder mystery. The whole story is about figuring out what happened to Batman. Why did he die? Why that night? Who killed him? Etc, etc, etc. I thought that was quite interesting. It was a good idea, you know. It leans into those detective aspects of the stories of, you know, Batman, but it brings it over to a new set of characters that honestly don't really get the limelight that much. And I did kind of think it was hilarious that they needed all 4 of them to figure out what happened when Batman probably could have done it by himself, but that's besides the point. Throughout the story, you're going to be meeting various characters like Harley Quinn, Mr. Freeze, and a bunch of others that I'm not going to spoil. And these are different takes on the characters. They're not what you saw in the Arkham games. They're not what you saw in the movies. This is a wholly unique take on the characters, and that was quite refreshing, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of people after seeing the Suicide Squad stuff would probably want it to be set in the Arkhamverse, but, you know, Suicide Squad got that mantle. For better or worse, we're not going to talk about that. But unfortunately, I just didn't find the story that particularly interesting. A lot of it was just convoluted and just convenient most of the time. The story never really grabbed me, you know. I was never emotionally invested. I didn't really care enough to relate to the characters, especially, like, these characters are not very relatable. They're just not, you know, they're just not Batman. And I hate saying that because obviously these characters don't get the limelight very often, but I just don't think they were done justice in this game. But then again, I don't know too much about those characters. I don't read the comics, I don't do any of that, so maybe it was a really good take on them. I don't know. But for me, just did not work. And that kind of sums up the story pretty well, actually. When I came into this and I did see the reviews I think were actually quite nice to the story, because I just didn't think it was anywhere near as good as what I assumed it would be, especially when, you know, Warner Brothers, the guys behind Batman Arkham Origins, was doing this game. Well, I think Arkham Origins' story is actually really good. Yeah, the twist with Joker is a bit annoying, because obviously Joker's the main villain in all of those games, apart from Arkham Knight, technically. But it was still a well-written story, whereas here, it just does not hit the same at all. There's just something missing. There's no connective tissue to it, I guess. That just results in a rather boring experience, and every time you go to the next story mission, you're just like, yep, you don't really care. I mean, you watch the cutscene, you hope something's going to grab your attention, but nothing ever does, especially with how the game ends. It's a very risky and bold choice to do it, but, you know, we're not going to talk about it too much. But essentially, it just didn't deliver what I wanted from it, which, you know, it's okay. It's okay. It may not have been for me, but it may have been for other people. I know some people actually really like it, and that's completely cool. But here are my main issues, and it's all to do with the gameplay. You see, Gotham Knights plays very similarly to a live service game. It's not a live service game. Naturally, there's been no DLC or anything that's come out for it. But there are so many elements of a live service game implemented into this game, you start questioning what the real goal was with Gotham Knights, especially after Suicide Squad. You see, Gotham Knights gameplay revolves around loot, okay? You go into a mission or an open world section, you beat some enemies up, and you get loot. And what you do with that loot is you get new armor pieces. Yeah, that pretty much does sound like an RPG or a live service game, both of which are not Gotham Knights. Gotham Knights kind of feels like a really dumbed down version of Batman Arkham. They decided to do a new combat system. Admittedly, I actually quite enjoyed the combat system until I realized that the further you get into this game, the more bullet spongy the enemies become, resulting in a really mind-numbing experience, man. It got to the point where I was basically gonna cry. I was gonna cry myself to sleep if I had to play any more of this game because of how spongy the enemies became. Now you'd think, oh well, if you actually just level up, right, you'd reduce the sponge. No. It doesn't matter how much you level up, the sponge is still going to be there, which is just incredibly annoying. The open world itself, honestly, is pretty awful. I hate it. I actually hate it. I rarely say that, but I hate the open world in this game. Going from Arkham Knight to Gotham Knights, the difference in quality is honestly astounding. The city doesn't really... It looks different. It has an art style to it, but it's not an art style I prefer over the Arkham games. And it certainly isn't an art style that I think is particularly good. The lighting seems off. When you look at it, the lighting just doesn't really... It just doesn't hit. You know what I mean? It doesn't look particularly next-gen. And this was a next-gen game. This came out on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Yes, you could say, well, it was mainly made for PS4, etc., etc. Well, it wasn't. Because I'm pretty sure the PS4 versions got delayed, didn't they? Or completely removed? Or something like that. So this is a next-gen game. And it does not look next-gen whatsoever. The city is dead. It feels lifeless. You thought Arkham Knight was lifeless because there was no civilians or anything like that? Yeah, you get civilians in this game, except they just exist. They don't do anything. They just exist. They're there to just stare at you while you punch bad guys and then go ah! And run away. It's such a missed opportunity, man. It's so many missed opportunities with the open world, and it's just not fun to explore. It's not fun to explore. They give you a bat cycle. Each character has their own bat cycle, and you go about 15 miles per hour on the bat cycle, so it doesn't really feel like a good experience, you know what I mean? You don't feel like you're going at blistering speeds, jumping off your bat cycle, jumping into an enemy group, beating them all down, getting back on your bat cycle, and you zoom off. No, you feel like you're going faster with these mystical abilities you unlock, which is also a very weird choice, and you basically can double jump. You can double jump in this game, and it's with mystical powers. It's hard to explain, but it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Oh, and the open world side activities are genuinely awful. I hated them. I'm sorry. I know some people like it, but I hated them. I can't stand it. It's the same thing over and over again. You go to a location on the map, you have a limited amount of side activities before you have to go back to your clock tower to reset the day, and then you do the same thing over and over again until you level up to beat the next story mission. It's awful. Stealth is honestly just useless here. I mean, there are moments where you are forced to use stealth in the game, but it's so downgraded compared to the Arkham games. I know I keep going back to the Arkham games, but let's be real. They had the foundation right there. They just had to switch up how the combat system works and improve on the stealth, and all they did was make it worse, which, you know, it's pretty difficult to do, I can't lie. It's a fair play to them. But I think the biggest problem was the gear system. The gear system just creates such a level of false progression. So every time you get a gear piece, you think, yes, I'm progressing towards something else. But the moment you get that gear piece and you go to the next mission, you get another gear piece that is slightly, ever so slightly better. And then you have to use these currencies to get a different outfit or upgrade your guns or your weapons for your different characters. And you just don't feel like you're progressing at all until you beat the next story mission. When you unlock a new piece of loot, you want to have some sort of effects on it, like an increase of damage or like a cool elemental effect like fire or something, or shock for like Nightwing or something. But none of that really happens in the game from what I played. I never experienced any game-changing loot whatsoever. And if you're going to put loot in the game, make it effective, make it useful, make a reason for it to exist. Is that too hard to do? Is that too hard to do? I don't know. But as I said, there are live service elements, but it's not a live service game, so not much changed in 2024, 2023. Now, the only thing that could have saved this game for me was if the 4 characters played extremely differently. So each character has their own unique playstyle with their own unique abilities that genuinely change how the gameplay works. But that's not the case. Red Hood was my go-to because I think Red Hood's pretty cool. I've always liked Red Hood. I haven't seen many stories with him in it. I haven't read any comics, like I said, but he was in Arkham Knight, and I don't know, I just like the character. He's cool. I like the idea of, you know, a Batman-trained hero turning anti-hero, you know what I mean? I think it's cool, but he's just not cool here, and none of the other characters are, and I'm not saying they had to be cool. You know, some of the best characters that you've probably ever experienced weren't cool, in a sense. Red Hood, you have guns, so you can shoot enemies slightly at range. Batgirl is, you know, focused on melee combat. And then Nightwing is focused on melee combat, and Robin is focused on melee. There's no changes to gameplay depending on the character you pick. And everything you do with one character doesn't progress the other characters. So when you level up your first character, let's say Red Hood for me, and you go on to Batgirl, for example, guess what? All your progression, it's pretty much null and void. Like, it basically punishes you for changing characters, which in a game that has 4 characters that is playable, that is ridiculous and stupid. And overall just really disappointed me, because I was really hoping that the one thing that they would nail down is the 4 characters playing differently, and they just don't. And that really annoyed me, because what is the point of having 4 characters if they don't play differently? What is the point to it? But I don't know. That's just me. I do recommend you research it, you know, check out other reviews other than mine to decide whether you're going to get the game if you haven't already played it. Because my opinion's just my opinion. I do have some hot takes every now and then, but I don't think this is one of them. I don't think this game is going to be for the majority of people, but that's just me, man. That's just me. But what do you think? If you play Gotham Knights, leave a comment down below. Let everyone have a chat in the comments. That'd be really fun. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. I'd really appreciate that. And maybe, if you're new, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and there'll be more content soon.